Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Think Global Podcast. I'm your host, International Seth, and today's date is May 10th, 2021. Got to give a shout out to all the lovely mothers across the world. Happy Mother's Day. You know, about 3 weeks ago, we sent out a public service announcement for anyone who would be interested in attending the Think Global Podcast. We received some inquiries, and one of which is from the guests who are coming on the show today. Miss Amanda Gray wrote a book that provides some insight into her and her family living abroad in the Republic of Georgia. So with no further ado, we want to bring Amanda Gray on to the Think Global Podcast. Welcome, Amanda.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. You know, every guest that comes on the show, we give them a segment on our show called the World Call. And that's when we give our guests 10 seconds to name off some of the country that you've been to. So right now, we are going to put Amanda Gray on the World Call. Ready, go.
Azerbaijan, Russia, Leiden, the Netherlands, Vienna, Austria, Scotland, UK, the US.
That's good. That's okay. Yeah, so I've heard a lot of Eastern Europeans on your list, Eastern European countries on your list. And I know that you had wrote a book and that you're coming on the show to discuss this book. But do you want to talk a little bit about why you wrote Memoirs of Grace in Georgia and just a little bit about what the book might be about?
So I started writing a different book back in 2016 about how to accomplish your God-given goals or God-given dreams. And I just started writing, and about 4,500 words later, I was like, oh, I haven't accomplished anything that I'm telling my audience to do. How are they going to take me seriously? And so I did a lot of soul searching, trying to find out, well, what is it that God has given to me? What is my God-given dream? And so before 2 months before that had happened, my parents had come back from the State Department, and we unpacked all of our boxes from storage, found that my journals were inside of it from the time that we moved overseas to the Republic of Georgia. And in it, as a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old girl, I wrote, I don't know why God wanted me to go through these things. Maybe I'm supposed to write a book about it one day to help young girls out like me. And that's what I did. So that was my God-given dream. He was giving me that inspiration to help me realize that I had a God-given dream and that I needed to accomplish it. And that was writing my memoir, Glimpses of Grace in Georgia.
Wow. Very interesting. Okay, so let's dig out a little bit more about your book now. We have an audience that's all across the world. We're a global podcast here, and we have some people from listening from all across the world. But I myself have lived in Atlanta, Georgia. Well, temporarily lived in Atlanta, Georgia for like the last 10 years. And I know that the Georgia that you're talking about is not the Georgia in Southeast in the United States of America. So do you want to talk a little bit about and set the context about why you and your family moved from the U.S. to the Republic of Georgia, which is an old Soviet Union state over there in Eastern Europe? So you want to set the stage?
In the year 2000, after Y2K hit, my dad lost his job and my mom found herself unemployed as well. So they both were trying to find something available in Ohio where we were living. And my dad had learned Russian in college. And so he wanted to go and actually use his Russian language skills in a former Soviet republic, whether that be the Ukraine, Georgia, any of the other places that would actually speak Russian or were part of the USSR. And they ended up going to Georgia after this opportunity came up because it was like this lifelong dream that my dad had had. And so this was in the year 2000. We had moved over, and it was, yes, in the November timeframe. And it was during a very difficult time, socially, economically, politically for Georgia. They were struggling from their civil war that had happened 5 years earlier. They were struggling from the Russian ruble crisis that had hit. And that is actually a common misconception when I say, oh, I moved to Georgia in 2000, and everyone's like, oh, where? Is it close to Atlanta? No, not nearly close to Atlanta. other side of the world.
Well, let's get into a little bit about life on the ground. How were you and your family impacted? What type of changes? What type of adaptation did you have to do? I'm sure there's probably some issues about the language. You want to talk about some of the challenges that you faced while on the ground?
Some of the things that were really interesting and very different were just the clothes that they wore, the cars that they drove, the food, the cuisine that they ate, the language differences. All of it kind of just shocked us to our core because we were completely and utterly unprepared for all of the differences. Just even simple things like men walking together down the road, like arm in arm, or they would greet each other with a kiss. It's very foreign to an American to greet each other with a kiss. You greet each other with a handshake, maybe a hug. They would greet each other with a handshake and a kiss on either cheek. And it was very strange for us. And it was like it's a very shocking experience for someone who's never been outside of the country before.
Yeah, yeah. And I can definitely relate to that. I mean, me living in the Middle East for the last 12, 13 years in Qatar and Kuwait, I don't know if you know this or not, but the men also they greet each other with a kiss on the right cheek, so right to right, and that's something I've been seeing, for on a daily basis for over the last decade, and is this still not something that culturally it's in my comfort zone. So yeah, so each is on, and I do understand and respect everybody's culture. But so how were you there? How long were you there for, and how did you overcome some of these challenges during your time living over in the Republic of Georgia?
We were there for about 3 years, but for the first 3 to 4 months, we were completely isolated from the other American community or expat community. It didn't have to be just Americans, but we were completely isolated from other people that spoke English. And that was really what was so hard about our experience there, was that we didn't really have a community to plug into, to share in these cultural differences or to share in the problems that we were having. So we really relied on each other as a family to try and overcome that. And our means of coping were, we would sit together as a family and we would play games in the evening and card games, just endless card games, and we would play silly games, and it was the most memorable time as a family in my mind, only because we were so isolated from everyone else and we didn't have any opportunities. We didn't speak the language, so it was really hard to make friends with other people that were living there without knowing the language. But once we had started to learn a little bit more Georgian, a little more Russian, things started becoming a little bit easier for us to make those friends, to interrelate with one another.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, well, let's get into a little bit about life on the ground. How were you and your family impacted? What type of changes? What type of adaptation did you have to do? I'm sure there's probably some issues about the language. You want to talk about some of the challenges that you faced while on the ground?
Definitely, probably the most eye-opening experiences of my entire life, right? So understanding a completely different culture, understanding a totally different language, trying to interrelate with interpersonal relationships with other people. It affects me in so many different ways, say outside of just my own life. It affects my relationship with my children because I am now a third culture child growing up, and I have my own children, and I'm teaching them different cultural aspects, like with the supra, right? The Georgian style of dining. We have the traditional Toastmaster. I'm passing along all of these traditional things that I learned in Georgia, and they get to experience this kind of thing as well as like in my own family. I get to make them some Georgian cuisine, and they find it fascinating. There's this type of bread. They cook it in like a cast iron oven, and when it comes out and it's hot, they put an egg in it and some butter and cheese, and they mix it up, and the egg is uncooked. So you mix it up, and because it's so hot, it melts the cheese and cooks the egg. And my kids get to experience that through me bringing that into our house. So I mean, it was an amazing experience for us to try and bring that home. So that's basically it's changed me. It's made me a better person to understand different cultures and where people are coming from. And yeah, so I mean, it's a lifetime, it's a change that you get to take for the rest of your life.
And I can definitely relate to that. I mean, me living in the Middle East for the last 12, 13 years in Qatar and Kuwait, I don't know if you know this or not, but the men also, they greet each other with a kiss on the right cheek, so right to right. And that's something I've been seeing, for on a daily basis for over the last decade. And it's just still not something that culturally it's in my comfort zone. So yeah, so each is on, and I do understand and respect everybody's culture. But so how were you there? How long were you there for? And how did you overcome some of these challenges during your time living over in the Republic of Georgia?
Absolutely. So we live close to Washington, D.C., and one day I was working close up to where the Pentagon is, and that's a pretty big touristy area. And there was a couple there speaking Russian, and they were like, "We don't know where to go. We don't know how to get back to our metro stop." And I had heard them talking about very concerned, like how can they get back to the metro stop that they need to go to. And I came up to them and I asked them in Russian, I said, "Do you need some help? Do you need to find the metro stop that you were looking for? Let me help you." And they were just like blown away. "Hey, this girl speaks Russian. I can't believe it. And where'd you learn Russian?" And I try to make myself my my accent sound less Americanized. And so they're like, "Where are you from? You must be from the Baltic region." And so they like couldn't point it out. And I said, "No, I'm from here." And they were just so overwhelmed with joy that I was able to help them out. They didn't speak very much English, so it was actually kind of a blessing for them to run into me that day.
All right, well, let's take a little bit of time to actually dive into a little bit about your book. You want to let your audience know where you can buy the book? I believe it's on Amazon.com, where you can buy the book, and maybe just like touch a little bit about what to expect if somebody was to buy a copy of your book.
So you can find it on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. Also, the publisher has it on their website. It's Westbow Press. You can find it in their bookstore. And when you open up the book, the first few chapters are kind of depressing, and that is basically just our experience when we were going there. But if you get past that, just know that it gets a lot better. And I think that's for anyone who first moves overseas. You really don't know what to expect until you get there, and your experience may be completely different from mine. But I think a lot of people, when you first move overseas, you're going to have a very similar experience. It's going to shock you a little bit to your core. But if you can get over that hump to the point where you are speaking the language and interacting with the locals, you're going to be so much better off.
Anybody who's listening to the show, why don't you go ahead and subscribe to the Think Global podcast first and foremost. If they go out on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or the publishing house and buy you a copy of Amanda's book. We want to support our guests, and it definitely is interesting to me. Hey, I might just go ahead and do that, Amanda. So count me in. You'll get one order from International Chef here on the Think Global podcast. So have you been thinking about doing something else, or what comes next? Do you got another book in you?
I don't know, that first book that I wrote that I got for like 4,500 words. Like, I think I'm going to finish that one.
Okay, so just really quick, what is the genre of the book? I mean, well, I guess it's a memoir, so it's autobiography, but does it have a lot of non-fictional historical references? What's inside of there, and how did you narrate it? What kind of narration is the book aimed at?
Nonfiction, it's a memoir. I tell it from my experience as a 12-year-old girl. So it's me writing as a 12-year-old girl, reliving it, actually.
Wow. Well, Amanda, thank you for coming on the Think Global podcast today. I wish you best of luck, and I hope you do squeeze that second book out. And I hope our audience make sure that you subscribe to the Think Global podcast. If this is their first time popping by, listen to this great content. And make sure that you go and support our guest coming on the show, Amanda Gray, with her Memoirs of Graces in Georgia. All right, Amanda, speak to you later. Bye-bye. Wow, wow. Okay, well, awesome, awesome. I'd like to thank you for coming on the Think Global podcast and sharing your story. I'd like to ask the first time users who are going through and listening to this great content to go ahead and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and Spotify and SoundCloud. Subscribe to all of our platforms here at the Think Global podcast. Also, we'd like to support our guests. So go ahead to Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, and the publishing house and get you a copy of Amanda's book.